everybody. So tonight we're going to do something a little bit different. What we would like to start doing is once a week, hopefully every Saturday, I will be teaching just a little bit of a Bible lesson. Try not to go too long, try to stick around 5 to 15 minutes depending on what we're doing. And this is hopefully going to be a weekly thing. So if you like it, give us a thumbs up and let us know, let me know what you would like to see taught. I'm just going to pray about it and see what I feel like God is wanting me to teach that week. But this is an opportunity for me to just continue to use the gifting that I think God has given me. And so that's that. So I hope you enjoy it. If you are just coming across this vlog and you know nothing about Christianity or God or the Bible, I hope you can get something out of it. And at the same time, if you are someone who is very deep in your faith and very knowledgeable, I also hope that you are able to glean something from it. This is hopefully, I'm gearing towards the average person, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So what I thought I'd start with tonight is the idea that when you want to get into the Bible, you want to start studying the Bible, there is so much to it. And the Bible is jam-packed full of different stories and different authors who wrote those stories, and they have everything from action to romance to intrigue and mystery and murder and everything in between. So when you want to start reading the Bible, where do you begin? Now there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of resources out there where they have reading plans, and they have how many you should read a day and what chapters. And so if you're really interested in it, I'm sure there are plenty of resources out there. A lot of them are free. A lot of Bibles have them if you have one. But generally speaking, people advise that you would start in the book of John. And now John is in the New Testament. It's one of the 4 Gospels written about Jesus' life. The Bible, if you're not familiar with it, the Bible is broken up into 2 major sections. One would be the Old Testament, and that takes up the majority of the Bible. And the other is the New Testament. And what splits them is Jesus. The Old Testament, Jesus' earthly presence is not talked about, whereas in the New Testament, this is where Jesus is born and his life and following. So typically people are encouraged to start in John. John's a very, I guess it's really just about Jesus, both his humanity and his deity. Now, I'll explain that in a little bit. But you can also start in Psalms, which is songs. Some are praising God, some are talking to God in a troubling way. If you're going through a hard time right now, and you just feel like you need to cry out to God or cry out to someone and you don't know what to say or how to do that, go through the Psalms. Those are great opportunities for you to relate to someone who is probably going through what you are going through, whether it's great stuff or hard times. You could also read Proverbs, which is actually right next to Psalms. Psalms is right in the middle of the book, typically. And if you just go right to the right of that, you will find Proverbs. And a lot of people I know read a proverb chapter a day. There's 31, I believe. And you can read a chapter a day, and that kind of gets you through a month. That's a good place to start, just to get you into the habit of reading. But tonight we're going to start with John. And John's a really, really interesting book. Now there's 4 Gospels. And the first 3, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are called the Synoptic Gospels. They're kind of very similar. They kind of pull from each other, and they're very similar. And John kind of stands alone. Now, John was the guy who walked, talked. He was actually with Jesus. He was one of Jesus's 3 closest friends. He was in his inner circle. And at the time when he was with him, John was referred to as the Sons of Thunder. Him and his brother James, they were referred as the Sons of Thunder because they were very passionate, and the reason they get this name is because one day they walk into a city and people don't want to hear what Jesus has to say, and he goes, "Let's call thunder and lightning down on this town." And Jesus is like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, just easy, buddy, easy." So they got the same name for it, the Sons of Thunder. They're very passionate, but by the time John ends his life, by the time he gets ready to die, he's known as the disciple of love. And we see this transformation between John, early John, disciple John, and later in his life when he writes some of his later books. But this John writes the book of John. In here, you will hear of another John. Now that's two different Johns. One's John the disciple, and there's John the Baptist, and those are two different guys. But as I was looking at John, the first couple of verses in John are so confusing. If you have no idea what they mean, they're so confusing. And I thought, man, I've been telling people to read John, but I'm sure within the first 10 verses, they have no idea what's happening, and it's very discouraging. And once you get past that, things kind of open up, but you have to shove through those first few verses. So what I would like to do tonight is just shove through those 2 verses, kind of unpack them a little bit, and hopefully expand on what's going on. So if you want to follow along, I'll read it, but if you want to follow along, we're in just John 1:1, and here's what the first few verses say. I'll be reading out of the NIV, which is the New International Version, 84, which is just one I prefer. It's one I grew up with. I like to read it, but we won't get into that tonight. All right, so here it is. John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and He was with God in the beginning. Whew. That's heavy stuff. It's very complicated to understand, and it's very deep theologically. There's a lot impacted there, but we'll move on. Through Him all things were made. Without Him nothing was made that has been made. In Him was life, and that life was the light of men. That light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. Well, you know what? A lot of people don't understand that, and I don't know if I fully understand it. So what we're going to try to do is just unpack that a little bit. Those are the first 5 verses of John. What in the world do they mean? Word was, word, light, darkness, made, nothing, life. What's going on? All right, so let's back up a little bit. If you are familiar with the Bible at all, if you went to Sunday school as a kid, one of the first verses you hear is Genesis 1:1, and Genesis is the first book of the Bible, and in that, the Genesis 1:1 is, in the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth. Okay, so in that beginning is it's somewhat familiar with people. It's deliberate that John writes in the beginning, because what he's doing to his readers is he's reaching all the way back to Genesis 1:1. And Genesis 1:1 is all about how God created the heavens and the earth. That God, before there was any of us, before there was any vegetation, before there was anything, God existed. There was only God. And He was in the beginning. And so what John is saying is that in the beginning, reaching to make you understand, to go all the way back to Genesis 1:1, before there was anything. And then John says, was the Word. Now, who is the Word? What is the Word? Now, if you look at it, if you have your Bible open, it's capitalized. And so we're talking about a proper name here, a proper noun. This means somebody specific. And what he's referring to is Jesus. He's saying Jesus was in the beginning. Jesus and the Word are the same thing. And so he's saying in the beginning was Jesus. Now that's very complicated to understand, because Jesus, as we know it, lived about 2,000 years ago, this man Jesus. But he's saying this guy actually was all the way in the beginning. And he was with God, which means kind of like as if I was standing next to someone. He was with God, but he was also God. Let me reread that. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Huge. This is big time stuff. So what he's saying is Jesus was with God, so they're kind of two different things, beings, but he was also God. Now this is what we call part of the triune God. We believe, Christians typically believe in the Trinity, which means there's 3 beings in one. It's very complicated. I don't want to go into it all right now. What I really want to express right now is that this man Jesus that we know, who lived about 2,000 years ago, is actually eternal. That he was there before anything else was existed. Now, not in his human form necessarily, but in his deity, which means in his God form. Okay? So it was way before creation. He stepped down into creation. And this is where we know that's why we celebrate Christmas, because of his birth, and Easter because of the resurrection. We'll get that at some point, hopefully. Moving on. Verse 3. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. Right? That, again, it's just a reference jumping all the way to Genesis about this. In the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth. And so he's saying, look, there is this God, we would call him the Father, okay? And then there's Jesus, who we would refer to as the Son. And the third part of that triune God, or the third being in that triune God, is the Holy Spirit. But Jesus is in there, and he's the Son. And John, the author here of this book, is saying, look, Jesus was there all the way in the beginning, and through him all was created. All that was created. So the waters, the heavens, the earth, the stars, the animals, the vegetation, everything, people, all of them have been created through Jesus. Now, if you jump to, if you're a little bit more familiar with the Bible, if you jump to Colossians, I believe 3, maybe 1, I think it's 1, you will see this idea that through him all things were created, for him, to him, and through him. And but anyways, so moving on, John is really trying to get this, it's very confusing, but it's trying to say, look, we know Jesus as a man, flesh and bone. But before he became a man, he actually existed eternally. That he was there before anything. That he is God. Now, John's book is very special in the fact that it does deal with his humanity and the fact that he hurt like we hurt, he hungered like we hungered, he felt like we felt. But he was also a God. Not a God, he was the God. He is God. Okay? And so right off the bat, John feels like it's very important for you to understand he's here, Jesus is flesh, but he's also God. 2 in 1, if you will. Okay? And then he goes on to say in verse 4 and 5, in him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. And what he's summing up here in his intro, I mean, he's just like 2 fists right at you, like right through you. He's coming at and saying, look, Jesus is God. He's also man. He's come to this earth, and he's light. He's come to a very dark place. And maybe right now you feel like you're in a very dark place. I will say this. Jesus came to this earth 2,000 years ago to bring light, to bring life. Not life here on this earth, but life everlasting. This is why Jesus came to earth, to come and give us life, to come and show us light. And maybe right now you are going through that really dark place right now, and you feel like the world is just caving in on you, and you feel like darkness is approaching fast. And I'm here to tell you, even though Jesus lived 2,000 years ago, Jesus is still alive today. And what he does is he wants to come in and he wants to bring you light. He wants to give you life. Let him in. Maybe you went to church as a kid, or maybe you kind of know the whole thing, but you kind of said, you know what, it's not really for me. I don't know. It happens. Let him in. Maybe for your whole existence, you have just denied who Jesus is, and you just nothing want. Maybe you've been hurt by a Christian, or you just feel like God has turned his back on you, and you feel like that's closing in. I encourage you, let Jesus in. Let him bring that life. Let him bring that light back into your world. Maybe you're a long-time Christian, and you're just going through something hard right now. I encourage you right now, as hard as it seems to turn to God, let Jesus come and be life. Let him create new life through you. All right. Well, that was John 1 through 5. Feel free to leave a comment. I would ask that you don't have to agree with everything I say. I encourage healthy debate and dialogue back and forth. But if you're just going to be rude, if you're just going to be hateful, I ask that you would just not comment. We'll probably just get rid of it anyways. But if you just have a question, if you're like, hey, wait a minute, I think about this, or I love new thought, I love new insight, and I love healthy debate. I love that stuff. So either way, if you like the video, give us a thumbs up. If you like that we're doing this, give us a thumbs up, let us know, write a comment in. Hopefully we're going to be doing this every week. In addition to this, I also would like to start doing our weekly Bible challenge, where I'm going to give you some clues, and then you can write in the comments if you find out. And then next week, next time I do this, hopefully next Saturday, I will give you a shout out and I'll let you know what the answers are. So here's your challenge. The book of the Bible that you have to find is alphabetically the first book. Alphabetically, it's the first book. The chapter is the number that all even numbers have as its factor. Right? I'm a teacher. I teach math. All even numbers have this number as its factor. Okay? Now, there's more than one, but all even numbers have this factor. Okay? And the verse, if you add it, it's a 2-digit number. If you add both digits and multiply both digits, you will get the same answer. If you add both digits and you multiply both digits, you get the same answer. Okay? So the verse is not the answer, the verse is those 2 digits. Okay? So I hope you enjoyed tonight. I look forward to hearing from you guys, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night.